si Jasper.
Ay, magandang umaga po sa lahat. Muli ako po si 𝗩𝗶𝘀𝗶𝘁, isang research assistant po sa 𝗩𝗏𝗂 UP Institute of Creative Writing. Mainit na umaga pala kasi balita na 53 degrees Celsius tayo ngayong araw, no? So mag-ingat po tayong lahat, uminom po tayo ng tubig, magdala ng yelo kung kaya. Ayun, so naka-livestream po tayo, no? Ngayon sa 𝗩𝗏𝗂 UP Institute of Creative Writing Facebook page. So maaari niyo pong i-share sa mga kasama, sa mga kaibigan, sa mga guro, sa mga kapamilya na gustong makarinig ng ating panayam ngayong umaga. Mapalad tayo po ngayon, no, na makasama at makapanayam ang author ng Smaller and Smaller Circles. Mapalad din po tayo na makasama ang mga magagaling na guro at manunulat mula sa kolehiyo at arte ng arte at literatura. Ayan. Para simulan po ang ating programa, ipapakilala ko po ang ating moderator na siyang magpapadaloy at mga ngasiwa ng ating programa ngayong umaga. Si Lakan Umali. Lakan Umali is an instructor at UP Diliman. Her work has been published in Soft Blow, Kritika Kultura, and 𝗩𝗏𝗂, the Journal of Contemporary Philippine Literature. She placed first in the English division of the 2017 Maningming Miklat Awards for Poetry and received an honorable mention at the first 𝗍𝗶𝘶𝗶 Poetry Competition. Palakpakan po natin si Miss Lakan Umali.
Hello, hi guys, good morning. On behalf of the Lakan Institute of Creative Writing, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's event. We have a very illustrious and rich speaker here, whom I'm sure you will gain a well of knowledge from, especially for those who are aspiring crime writers yourselves. So again, we're grateful to everyone for being here. We would also like to thank the College of Arts and Letters, Soho Press, and National Bookstore for making today's event possible. Again, there's a bookstore outside. Alam ko lahat naman kayo nag-enjoy sa retail therapy, especially the very stressful part in the sem right now. So please buy some books. Okay. To begin today's event, I'll be reading a message from the College of Arts and Letters Dean, Dr. 𝗩𝗏𝗀𝗶𝗶. So, unfortunately, he can't be with us today, so I'm gonna try to use a lower register of voice to read out this message. Mensahe mula kay Dekano 𝗩𝗏𝗀𝗶𝗶. Magandang umaga, good morning. Sa ngalan ng Kolehiyo ng Arte at Literatura, mulugod kong binabati ang likhaan, ICW, sa kanilang panserya sa umagang ito, bilang bahagi pa rin ng buwan ng panitikan. Mahalaga ang programang ito, lalo na't sa nagbibigay ito sa pagtatalakay ng mga bagong lathaang libro. Mga librong kinilala ng mga kritiko, kasama ang mga nagwagi at maaari ding namang mga libro na na-red tag press. Dahil sa dami ng kanyang napagwagian na sinulat dahil sa pagiging periodista sa Singapore, US, Europe, Australia at dito sa Pilipinas, pwede kayang maging bigger and bigger circles ang pamagat. Kung nabasa niyo ang kanyang nobela at iba pang nasulat, kayo rin ang makakasagot nito. Mahalaga ang ganitong anyo ng panayam o ang book talk kumpara sa ritual ng paglulunsad ng libro. Bagamat mas papabora ng mga publisista ang paglulunsad dahil sa napapabili ng libro ang mga dumalo. Higit namang produkto ito at mapanghamon para sa mga nais sumunod sa yapak na iniidolo nilang manunulat. Sa hamong hatid ng panayam ng panitikan o PAN sa mga sumisibol na manunulat, hindi ninerbyusin sa pagsusulat, matatakot o maiinip sa paglikha ang mga future fictionist na poet dahil nakikita na nila ang mapa at plano sa gagamitin at ang posibleng maging problema sa kanilang pagkatha sa pagbubuo ng isang masaklaw na naratibo. Tulad ng mga panauhin nating otor ngayong umaga, maging isang mabuti at matapang sa pagsusulat tulad ni 𝗍𝗏𝗶𝗶 Batacan at ang kanyang mga tauhan. Malaya ang inyong mararating at marami ito. Magandang umaga at padayon. Dr. 𝗩𝗏𝗀𝗶𝗶. Okay. Now it is my very, very great honor and privilege to introduce today's speaker, the woman for whom we were all here. Ms. F.H. Batacan is a Filipino journalist and the writer of crime and mystery fiction. She worked in the Philippine intelligence community for nearly a decade and later switched careers to journalism. She was a fellow at the 1996 National Writers Workshop in Dumaguete and has won 2 Don Carlos Palanca Memorial Awards for Literature, including the 1999 Grand Prize for the English novel for her first novel, Smaller and Smaller Circles, published in its original novella form by the University of the Philippines Press in 2002. The novella would go on to win the Manila Critics Circle National Book Award in 2002, as well as the Madrigal Gonzalez Best First Book Award in 2003. In 2008, her speculative fiction story, Keeping Time, won first place in the English category of the 2008 Free Press Literary Awards. And in 2013, her crime story, Comforter of the Afflicted, was published in Manila Noir, part of the Noir series of books by Brooklyn-based Akashic Books. She was signed on by literary agents, Books at Jacaranda LLP in 2011. They facilitated the sale of Smaller and Smaller Circles to New York-based international crime fiction publisher Soho Press, which published it in 2015 as an expanded novel. 2 years later, the Philippines TBA Studios acquired the film rights and adapted the novel into a feature film directed by Raya Martin. Batacan's second book, Accidents Happen, a collection of previously published but revised short stories, has been acquired by Soho Press. It is due for release in 2004 and is currently available sa fully booked site if you want to pre-order it, so pre-order na kayo. She has represented the Philippines in Singapore Writers Festival and was featured on panels with crime fiction writers John Burdett, Stephen Leder, and Catherine Fox. She guest edited the special crime, suspense, and mystery issue of Philippine genre stories released in December 2008. Most recently, she was asked to judge the fiction category for the 2023 NUS Literary Awards. Ms. Batacan has been based in Singapore since 2000. She has worked as a business journalist for the Straits Times. After moving back to Manila for 2 years, she returned to Singapore in 2015 and now oversees news coverage out of the US, Europe, and Australia as an editor for the international desk of Singapore state broadcaster CNA. She's currently at work on a second novel. So please, let's all give a very hearty round of applause to Ms. F.H. Batacan.
Good morning. I'm really grateful to everyone for coming here today in spite of the heat. I arrived in Manila on Thursday and I've been slowly melting ever since. So this is for me a very exciting, it's a kind of homecoming for me. I was telling Ms. Lakan that I haven't been to Palma Hall in 25 years. Yes. Wow talaga. Tanda na ako. I think the last time I was here, I was still completing my MA, yung super duper MRR na. So it's a happy day for me. I get to see some familiar faces and true story, I was not a creative writing major. I was an art studies major. Tapos, nagkukwentuhan kami kanina, sabi ko sa kanya, naubusan na ako ng courses in my own art studies field. So sabi ko, saan ako kaya pwedeng kumuha ng elective? So I took 2 or 3 creative writing courses just to parang maitawid ko yung MRR. Tapos nakatapos naman ng at last, after 9.5 years, parang talagang sa MRR in 1999. So this is a great homecoming for me. Over the past few decades, dekada na talaga ang binibilang na maraming nagtatanong bakit hindi tayo gumagawa ng mas maraming crime fiction sa Pilipinas. Pero I'm really happy that in the last decade or so, we've been seeing more and more people coming out with their own crime fiction works. So nandyan, of course, our illustrious Charles Onong. There's the supernatural detective novel, detective series, 𝗍𝗫, which is so popular and is already an animated series as well. There's a lot of interest from there's groups of crime fiction writers that are they're self-publishing, and so it's something that makes me really, really happy. I think for the longest time we had kind of a romanticized hopelessness in the way we view crime, a stoic acceptance that that's the way things are in the Philippines, no? To paraphrase the crime writer Andrew Taylor, we long ago stopped trying to make sense of our violent society, and we quit hoping that evil would not go unpunished. So this growth of crime fiction, Pinoy crime fiction, is something I celebrate. I'm thrilled with it. I think society needs crime fiction, and I think Philippine society in particular especially needs the kind of crime fiction that reflects and interrogates its realities and its injustices and its inequities. I'll come to that point later. But first, with your permission, I'll take a little bit of time to talk about the new book that's coming out later this year. I'm in the middle of revisions, so I think my hair is thinning because of that, but and it's definitely graying. So Accidents Happen is a collection of short stories that have been published over the last 2 decades, and there are some new stories as well. Many of these stories were inspired by news I read or news I actually covered in the course of my work as a journalist, or situations or attitudes I encountered in my career, both in the intelligence community as well as in media. I'd like to read you excerpts from 2 stories, and there's a reason why I've chosen these 2 stories in particular. The first story that I'll be reading from is called Accidents Happen. It's the title story. It's about a young boy named Francis. He's born into a powerful political family. Francis is painfully aware that he's being groomed for a life he doesn't fully understand, but already knows with the unfailing instinct that many children have that he doesn't want it. So this scene is from where Francis pays a visit to his grandfather, who is a retired politician, ailing politician, but still very, very political. The old man sat in his wheelchair and observed Francis for several minutes with hard, glittering black eyes. His bony wrists and ankles stuck out of the sleeves and legs of his midnight blue pajamas. He'd been unhappy with retirement, unaccustomed to the loss of influence and attention. But he'd made sure his son would carry on the family business, which was, is, and always would be politics. He'd suffered a stroke a few years after, and the imposing figure seemed to have shrunk since. Francis had seen photos of him from the 70s when he was at the height of his political career, tall, well-dressed, handsome. Now, as shrunken and helpless as he was, one tube sticking out of one nostril, another snaking out from under his shirt, neither age nor illness had diminished his coldness and arrogance. Some food had been served and some cold pineapple juice in a glass, but Francis had refused. He couldn't bear the thought of eating in front of his grandfather. He could feel somehow that the old man approved of this, that abstinence was some kind of virtue in his eyes. Instead, Francis sat on his hands, conscious of the paleness of his thin legs against the dark blue of his school shorts. He looked around him at the books on the shelves, the 𝗩𝗶𝘀 shell lamps, the large green oxygen tank beside his grandfather's wheelchair. He'd only been to this house a few times before. The old man wasn't sentimental about seeing his grandchildren, though he kept track of them well enough. But it always gave him the creeps. It was old and dark in places, but someone had taken care to polish the wooden floors until they gleamed, reflecting the light from every crack and seam and opening. The sounds from the street outside, traffic, voices, dogs barking, floated up through the windows, but inside there was only silence. Francis's father came back to the room when it was time to go, and the senator caught him by the wrist. "Ricardo," he said. His voice was raspy and the words came out slowly, but there was no mistaking what he was saying. "Keep an eye on this one. He's not like your other brats." Francis smelled tobacco and decay on the old man's breath when he hesitantly came up to kiss him on the cheek. But he felt strong, thin hands gripping his shoulders and holding him at arm's length. "You are a keen observer. You watch and wait. The best ones always do." Then the hands fell away and the white lashes closed over the eyes. "You'll be next." Next what? Francis didn't want to know, though deep down, he already did. Yun. So, thank you. So I wrote this story several years ago as a reflection on the nature of the Philippines' dynastic politics and how its Nepo babies are born into a world of privilege and entitlement in a never-ending cycle that often spells disenfranchisement and oppression for us ordinary Filipinos. From a young age, they are shoved down our throats as fashion models or actors or sportsmen or women. We see them on TV, in advertisements, giant billboards along the highways. They grow up in the public eye and embed themselves in the public consciousness. So we get used to hearing about them. They become part of the fabric of conversation and community life. Their names carry weight, not just because of the history they bear, but also because of repetition and exposure. And I wanted to imagine what would happen if that Nepo baby, even at such a young age, rebelled against that life. What if that Nepo baby wanted no part of that world and the role that he was being groomed for? Wouldn't that be something? Has anyone from that world ever turned his or her back on the cocoon of power and privilege they live in and voluntarily walked away? And in walking away, broken the cycle of nepotism and generational entitlement to public office. So the second story, I saw the 10 minutes flash, so I'll try to speed it up. So the second story I'd like to read from is called The One Cry, and it's about a murder in a small town that 𝗩𝗶𝘀𝗶𝗶, the journalist from Circles, is sent to do an investigative report on. So basically, the story is about a town that kind of comes together to prevent justice from being served the victim of the crime. So in this scene, Joanna and her freelance photographer, Tony, are invited to lunch, invited with background Armalite, no, invited to lunch by the mayor's socialite wife. Joanna's having a conversation with the wife, but at the same time, she's reading the situation, reading the subtext, and acutely aware of the danger they're in. I notice she doesn't address Tony. He's just a photographer, but Tony doesn't mind. I can almost see the gears turning in his head. Poor Melinda Ochoa. She would shrivel up in embarrassment if she knew how well Tony reads people, how he can see past her colegiala affectations, her effervescent chumminess, the studied casualness of her blue jeans and short-sleeved shirt. Trophy mistress of a filthy rich man living the oh-so-simple life in this rural backwater, in a home designed by a Japanese architect. The occasional flash of one or two well-chosen diamonds on the fingers of her constantly mobile hands. She would be mortified if she knew what Tony saw, how she was merely tolerated in her husband's family, how hard she tried to fit in and be nice to her domineering snob of a mother-in-law, mastering the skill of relentless flattery, how well she took the occasional beating from her hard-drinking husband, how she looked at all of it philosophically, how pragmatic she was about it, how artfully she applied concealer to the bruises, small prices to pay for living well. You know, and now she leans toward me, reaching out to touch my arm. I hope you will be objective about this murder thing, huh? So here it is, the stick after the carrot, the real reason why we've been invited here. The words lie on the invisible table of conversation like a live mudfish, wriggling, black, slippery. My husband has many political enemies who would not hesitate to use this against him. It's awfully difficult not to jerk my arm away, like I've come in contact with a boiling kettle. Okay, thank you. As a writer of crime fiction, I'm not really interested in outwitting my readers or testing their crime-solving skills. There are other writers who do this very well and at a very high level. This is their thing. I'm more interested in trying to interrogate or to make sense of a society that often doesn't make sense, even to those of us who are born in it, and raised in it and live in it. I'm interested in the complicity of Philippine society in the crimes that happen around us every day. But I'm also deeply interested in what I like to call everyday violences, yung pang-araw-araw na karahasan. What's that? It's not necessarily murder, it's not necessarily, you get beaten up or something, but I think I want to look specifically at the systemic violence of Filipinos, for example, not being able to provide for themselves or their families, the violence of not being able to move comfortably from place to place on public transportation. Some of you may have had to stand in a long queue just to board a train to get here. Some of you may have spent hours trying to get here. I know someone, I used to work with someone who would spend anywhere from 5 to 8 hours a day commuting back and forth to work. Tapos tinanong ko sa kanya, ba't hindi ka na lang kaya mag-board dun sa ano? One, she can't afford it. Two, she has a daughter to raise. She was a single mom. So kailangan niyang umuwi kung saan sila nakatira. So what else? The violence of not having adequate health care, of being forced to go from hospital to hospital to hospital because you don't have the funds to make a deposit. the invisible and arbitrary restrictions on our movements in and out of the country. We've all heard the horror stories of ma-offload ka or mababump off ka because you look poor, di ba? We can't afford tayo at baka mag-TNT. The violence of being forced to bear one child after another, children unplanned for and unwanted, simply because there's no free and widespread access to or even knowledge of birth control. Children that their mothers can no longer feed, pregnancies the mother's body can barely support because she herself lacks the nutrition, and her pelvic floor is practically falling out from giving birth more than a dozen times in her lifetime. So, yun yung mga sinasab every day I think about these things na, you know, I'm not rich. I live a comfortable life, but it's comfortable largely because the country that I live in facilitates the needs of daily life. It facilitates, I can go hop on a train quickly and be assured that I will get to my destination. I can hop on a bus or any other form of public transport. I will not get there to my destination feeling like I've run a marathon or whatever. I can get health care. I can provide for my son. My son can get reasonably priced education that is democratic for many people. It's not out of everyday violences. Ayun. So, you know how it's often said that to understand a city, you must partake of its cuisine. And allow me to digress a little bit. I was in Hanoi late last year, and I'm a big foodie, as you can see. I love to cook. I love exploring cuisines. And I noticed that the Vietnamese don't rely very much on what I call culinary crutches. So yan yung mga Maggi seasoning, mga chicken powder, and so on. The flavors are very clean, and there's always an abundance of vegetables and herbs on the table or the plate. So that tells me, what does that tell me? It tells me that ordinary people, ordinary Vietnamese, paying the equivalent of $1 for their lunch, are able to access fresh vegetables and protein at a lower cost. Many Filipino cooks, on the other hand, often rely on these crutches kasi na-extend niya yung flavor, no? And extending flavor is important when you don't have much money, you don't have access, you may be feeding a large family, no? So that in turn tells me that yes, access to vegetables is not as widespread or easy or as affordable as it should be, and that's a problem. That's a problem agriculturally. That's a problem economically. That's a health problem, education-wise, for young children who are not getting adequate nutrition to stay alert and have the stamina for a long school day. So, in the same manner, mabalik tayo from pagluluto to pagsusulat. In the same manner, to understand a country or a city, I really believe you need to read its crime fiction. The writer Justin Peacock wrote, "We are living in a golden age of the social novel. However, it has largely gone unnoticed by the critical establishment, meaning in the West, because it is taking place almost exclusively within the crime novel." In my work, for example, you won't find anything very high-tech. Science in Circles has a nice new computer, but that's about all he has. Everything else in his laboratory is either hiram or acquired through a grant, or it's something that they cobbled together themselves using abilidad, a diskarte, ganon. So you won't find anything super clever or super brilliant in the investigators. That's because in reality, our law enforcers are failing at the most basic level, at data and evidence collection, at protection, at retrieval. These are super basic, nasa pinakamababang antas ng law enforcement functions, and we are failing at those. We are not even talking yet about analysis and coordination, and at a higher level about policy. So I think going back to what I said before about my not being interested in yung makipagtagisan ng talino sa mambabasa, that's not really my thing. I think much contemporary crime fiction has actually moved past the idea of tidy solutions and light conquering the dark. A lot of the crime fiction I've been reading, and a lot of Asian crime fiction actually has very few conventionally tidy resolutions. And that, I think, also reflects the world that we live in. The complications, the moral and legal compromises, the failure of institutions and agencies, the collective failure of societies. In many novels now, the most you can arrive at is not justice, but understanding. Sometimes you get to the end of a book and nothing has changed. Or maybe only the detective or the central character has changed. And maybe he or she is damaged or disillusioned somehow, but chooses to battle on. And that's also why I think crime fiction is so important in a country like ours and in the world we live in now, because when everything is going so badly, sometimes all you have left to go on is a blind and inescapable sense of duty, the garbage man at the end of the world. So.
Thank you so much, Ms. Batacan. I hope that the audience, especially the students, learned something about that synthesis of socially engaged content with the precision of and attention to detail, especially in language. No? So let's now hear from our reactor. Before they begin talking, let me introduce them. Tungkol kay Tilde Acuna. Nagtuturo si Tilde Acuna o Arvin Acuna ng mga kurso sa panitikan, malikhaing pagsulat at Philippine Studies sa Departamento ng Filipino at Panitikan ng Pilipinas sa Universidad ng Pilipinas. Ang mga sanaysay niya ay nasa Humanities Diliman, Kritika Kultura, Jacket 2, Bulatlat at ilang entolohiya na inilimbag ng Komisyon ng Wikang Pilipino, Sentro ng Wikang Pilipino, at National Commission for Culture and the Arts, at iba pang publikasyon. Autor siya ng Oroboro at iba pang mga abiso mula sa UP Press. Ilustrador ng melismas ni Marlon Hakla na inilimbag ng 𝗩𝗏 Press at co-editor ng Destination Southeast Asia 2050 AD ng Penguin Random House Southeast Asia at iba pang antolohiya. Please, let's all welcome Tilde Acuna.
Ayun, magandang umaga sa lahat, no. Salamat sa introduction, Lakan, at sa pagbabahagi, no, kay Ms. Batacan. Gusto kong simulan doon sa dearth ng crime fiction. May similar akong agenda, no. Parang may dearth naman ng science fiction. parang yung genre fiction na yun nga, hindi gaanong lumalabas sa kumbaga hindi siya ganong wala siyang similar na limelight, pero yung gusto kong sabihin about sa punto na ito, hindi ko alam kung fortunate or unfortunate na parang kailangan pa niyang dumaan sa tulad, i-claim ko na, tulad namin na may certain status sa institutions para ma-introduce sa, parang kailangan dumaan pa sa, yun nga, mga taong may titulo tulad ko bilang guro. Tapos syempre, ng mga author na na nanalo ng awards, no, para maipakilala siya. At personally guilty rin ako dito, no. Hindi ako ganun ka aware sa ilang napapublish sa independent scene. Kumbaga may attempt ako na masagap siya lahat. Pero kunyari yung mga na-publish or ni-launch nung book fair, may panel on crime fiction kahapon, no. So hindi pa ako nakakapag-dive in sa kanya, no. So may ganong may ganong pagiging reflexive doon sa yun nga, hindi lang yung literary with a capital L yung babasahin, no. Though yun nga, may personal din akong interest, halimbawa sa comics, yung inclusion niya sa syllabus. May ganong, pero yun nga, kailangan niyang dumaan doon sa mga kunyaring may dangal na may extra letter sa dulo ng apelyido, may MA, may PhD, no. Pero supposedly dapat may community ng hindi na kami kailangan. Parang may ganong future vision na sana maging, well, okay namang may trabaho kami, no? Pero parang may ganong parang better siguro kung maging mabawasan yung kapangyarihan nung mga tulad namin na to some extent ay nasa institusyon. Kasi yung may dangal pa rin na yung may dangal pa rin na works of literature na literary with a capital L. Kapag may kapag realist, tas mag-i-introduce ka ng genre elements, dun siya usually kumbaga papatok muna siya dun sa mga kritiko bago siya. Tas unti-unti, syempre naman yan negotiation. So hopefully may nagagawa rin naman yung mga award-winning writers at mga arbiters of taste sa academe para ma-introduce yung dating nasa yung mga popular genre para magkaroon siya ng legitimacy. Similar pero syempre hindi exactly pareho yung kaso ng sci-fi or mas familiar term yung speculative fiction, no? Tsaka ng crime fiction. Pero fortunately yun nga, may improvement dito sa recent na mga development. Tapos siguro yung sunod na gusto kong nag-notes ako in connection din dun sa mga na ibahagi, no. So yung structural violence, kasi kunyari yun nga, kung pag-uusapan na natin yung yung smaller and smaller circles na ay assume kaya tayo nandito, no. Yun yung take off point nung ilang conversation na pwedeng mangyari. Kasi pwede siyang tignan sa una na attempt sa pag-unawa, no, doon sa psyche ng serial killer. Pero yun nga, may hindi siya sinisingle out as lang siya as mamamatay tao lang. Syempre may involved na ano bang nangyari sa kanya, may pagbubuo ng context kung anong karahasan yung pinagdaanan niya para siya rin mismo mag-perpetuate, no, nung ganong klaseng karahasan. Tapos ang ilan pang possible na na mag-arise, no, doon sa ilang attempts ng mga Jesuit nating detectives doon sa sa nobela. Tawag dito hanggang yun nga nung nire-read ko siya, syempre nire-read ko siya, nakakahiya naman, di ba? Pag wala akong idea kasi years ago ko siya nabasa, no. So parang yung after ko siya basahin, parang isang naging question sa isip ko. Hanggang saan, baka pwedeng mag-spark ng conversation syempre later, no. Hanggang saan mo itatry unawain kasi yung yung serial killer sa nobela, di ba? So biktima siya, pero yun nga, yung teacher niya ba sa PE, iisipin din natin. kung anong pinagdaanan niya. Syempre hindi magiging may punto de vista syempre iti-take yung nobela, parang naman ang hirap naman kung lahat ng punto de vista ay kukunin mo. Pero yun nga sa kung kailan mo pwedeng i-consider i-extend yung pag-unawa doon sa PE teacher, bakit wala? Parang dahil creepy siya, ganun. Which is true, di ba? Parang alam naman natin kung gaano ka. Kahit description lang, parang tinatayuan ng balahibo doon sa sa ginawa nung, alam nyo na yan, no? Hindi ko na, yung ginawa nung PE teacher. Tas ako rin personally, parang to be, para maging diretso, parang pag ganun ka, wala akong pakialam sa'yo. Parang ganun. Pero yun nga, parang, may pagkakataon ba na i-consider natin siya. Pero ako personally, hindi ko ma-imagine yung sarili ko na pag ginawa mo yun, itatry kitang unawain. Kasi, hindi, bahala ka dyan. No? Pero yun nga, pero nag-a-arise yung ganong question, masama ba akong tao? Kasi, wala akong pakialam sa isip nitong creepy motherfucker na to, no? Parang ganoon eh. May limitasyon yung pag-unawa. Pero yun nga, babalik yung tanong, bakit limitado yung pag-unawa ko? Hindi ko malalapitan yan pag alam kong ganyan yung taong yan. No? May ganon. So may sa sarili, at least personally, sa sarili ko, may mag-a-arise din na question hanggang saan yung kayang i-take nang hindi ka nagsasalita from a moral high ground na ikaw yung pinaka mabuting tao sa lahat. Pero yun nga, may tolerance level yung kaya mong at least ewan ko, siguro lahat naman tayo may tolerance level kung hanggang kailan natin kayang unawain yung tinitignan ng lipunan na masamang tao. Kaso sa kwento kasi, 'di ba? Mas exposed, mas naibalita, no? Mas naibalita yung mga pagpatay. So under the rug talaga yung yung kumbaga unnoticed, yung hanggang mamatay na lang tong si PE teacher. Walang nakakaalam nung krimen niya kundi yung mga biktima niya. So may ganong mga may mga ganong mga moral dilemma, no, na mag-a-arise dun sa pagbabasa ng nobela. Tapos magda-digress na ba ako? Siguro magda-digress lang akong saglit, no. Kasi yun nga yung hirap ng pag-explore ng serial killer tsaka ng yung reservation siguro sa pag-aaral ng sa pagsusulat ng crime fiction. Sana hindi siya dahil normal na sa atin. Normal na sa atin 'yan, ba't ba natin pag-uusapan? Iba yung sa iba yung ilang arguments, syempre ipapasok ko lang ng konti yung bias or agenda ko. Sa sci-fi iba naman kasi, no? Parang may palagay yung iba na backward country kasi tayo. So hindi tayo high-tech enough, so hindi maggigin ng traction yung sci-fi. So ipasok natin siya sa umbrella, no, ng speculative fiction. Fantasy mas mas possible siyang maging readable, no, mas possible siyang ma-appreciate nung mga tao. Pero yung pag-resist doon sa pag-explore ng mga ganitong bagay, syempre may sinasabi rin siya sa atin bilang society. Tapos yun nga, yung serial killer kasi sa atin, lalo sa panahon na in-embolden ito ni Duterte, di ba? So parang ang serial killer sa atin, at least sa akin yung idea ko ng serial killer, though syempre may mas canonical na sa kanya na pagde-define. EFP-PNP talaga. Kasi yung concern ng mga nung ni 𝗩𝗶𝘀𝗶𝗶, nung parang nung director dito sa nobela, hindi mo na siya makikita kasi nga kapag may pumutok na baril sa panahon ni Duterte, yun na yun, gagawan mo ng excuse. At syempre sa drug war, maraming bata yung mga biktima. So yung may ganong at least para sa akin, no, may ganung pagpapalagay na yung pinaka mamamatay tao dito, supposedly yung enforcers ng batas. Yun yung irony. Tapos pupunta ka dun sa isa sa mga nabanggit na punto kanina, yung pagiging morally gray, yung ibang halimbawa, 'di ba, si Jerome, nagsinungaling siya, 'di ba? Nagsinungaling siya, magsisinungaling sila para makakuha ng information kasi kailangan yun. Pero alangan namang sabihin mo, ilang utos ba yun? Alangan namang sabihin mo, masama magsinungaling, ba't ka nagsinungaling? Kumbaga, may kailangan kang goal. Kumbaga, kailangan mong madungi sa, yun nga, kaya interesting yung garbage collector at the end of, kasi alangan namang itatry mong iunawain yung mga bagay-bagay, tas hindi ka madudumihan, no? Parang okay. Inevitable na na madudungisan yung mga kamay natin sa search for truth or kung ano mang gusto nating mahanap, no? So ayun, at siguro yung isa sa hindi ko alam kung mapapalagay siyang crime fiction, pero yung isang page turner, kasi yun nga yung who done it, no, yung crime fiction. Ito yung tipong hawak mo siya, tapos kahit may iba kang kailangang gawin, ipapabayaan mo yon kasi gusto mo na malaman yung sunod na, kumbaga yung pagiging cliffhanger. Kasi nga may problema ako sa, baka lahat tayo, no, may problema ako sa attention span nitong mga nakaraan. Pero yun nga, nung binalikan ko yung smaller and smaller circles, parang okay, ang alam ko may problema ako sa attention span, pero ba't parang hindi ko to mabitiwan. Tapos may similar experience sa recent Filipino novel, yung kung familiar kayo doon sa Dreamland trilogy ni Ronaldo Vivo. May ganoon din. Ano ba nangyari dito? Ano ba, nasan yung anak niya? Basta may ganoon doon sa Bangin, no, yung second novel, nasan yung anak nito? Tapos parang pakiramdam ko, ba't mas concerned pa ako sa anak nito kaysa sa mga totoong tao, di ba? May ganun. In the same way, yung mga bata doon sa sa smaller and smaller circles, ba't may pakialam pa akong ma-resolve yung killings kaysa doon sa. Pero yun nga, may mga ganung pag-explore na yun nga, may mag-a-arise sa atin ng sort of yun nga, mga moral na dilema. Tapos hopefully siya, kumbaga pwede natin siyang angkla para tignan yung Philippine social reality. So yun yung interesting na, I think, effect ng pagbabasa ng panitikan. Tapos finally, huling punto, no, yung kasi yun nga, yung social novel, no, yung pagiging social ng mga novel, at yung magpapasadahan ko lang to, sana maitawid ko, no. Yung pagiging national allegory ng third world literature, may ganong debate kasi may ilang debate na kapag galing third world, tungkol na siya kaagad sa nation, no. At parang totoo kasi siya. para may ganun kasing inevitably nangyayari siya. Kasi kunyari ito, yun nga, sa unang tingin, psyche yung internal, psyche yung pinag-uusapan. Pero biglang mag-zoom out ka sa Philippine society tungkol siya sa nation and so on. Tapos may syempre si Frederick Jameson, no, yung naging nalagay sa bad light kasi nga may ganun siyang comment na bakit yung mga yung mga mahihirap na bansa hindi pwedeng magsulat tungkol sa sa sarili lang nila. Parang oo, parang ganun. Parang oo yung sagot doon. Kasi yun nga, pag lagi siyang it has something to do with the nation and society. Parang kahit pilitin mo na hindi siya tungkol sa nation, parang imposible. Mahirap alisin, no, yung factor na tungkol siya sa lipunang Pilipino. So siguro ayun muna, dito ko muna siguro puputulin yung 5 minutes, sige. yung reaction, no. Siya, kumbaga simply put, yung mga nobela o yung fiction in general, I'd go as far as, pero hindi ko alam kung mapapanindigan ko to. I'd go as far as kahit naman first world literature, siya dahil lalo mula siya sa ilang imperial core, no? Parang talaga, matatalakay talaga niya yung tsaka yan object, material yan no? Kung pinroduce siya, kung susuriin mo siya bilang object, yung isang novel, nanggaling siya may pinagmulan siya, yung papel niyan, kahit physical, bilang physical na object. Yung pinanggalingan niyan, malamang may exploitation somewhere kung paano yan nabuo. So, tingin ko, imposibleng magkaroon ng sining o literature na sining o literature. Yan, skill issue yan nung nagbabasa, parang ganun. So, depende yan sa nagbabasa. Yun lang siguro muna. Salamat.
Thank you so much, Tilde, for those wonderful insights. Now, before we move on to the next part of our program, first, I would just like to remind the audience to answer the feedback form in exchange for food. And Miss 𝗍𝗍 was kind enough to sponsor today's ice cream. So you may get ice cream after the event. Please also don't forget to stop by the book sale outside. The edition of Smaller and Smaller Circles with the black cover is selling for $3.15, and the edition of the blue cover is selling for $8.45. So please, let's read some books and eat some ice cream. Okay, so for the next part of our event, we'll move on to the elevator pitch. So before A View to a Kill, the 𝗩𝗂𝗃𝗊 solicited various elevator pitches from readers, from aspiring writers, and today Miss 𝗍𝗍 and the audience will evaluate the chosen elevator pitches that were submitted for today. So I will read the elevator pitch. Miss 𝗍𝗍 and Tilde, you can also give your input, Tilde, will evaluate the pitch, and we'd also like to hear the opinions of the audience, because the audience, you are also potential readers and buyers of books. So let's view the elevator pitches. Oh, sorry, okay. So, I'm gonna stand up for this. So the first elevator pitch is from Mark Flores. It's entitled Cathedral of Shadows. I will read the description. The tranquil devotion of Holy Week in Manila is shattered when a prominent priest is found murdered in a manner reminiscent of ancient Anita rituals. His head was cut off and his body was crucified in a grotesque fashion. The sacrilege is the first act of a shadowy figure who seeks to expose the church's historical sins. Enter 𝗏𝗏 Aguilar, a sharp-minded private investigator with the historian's eye and the crisis of faith. As he unravels the tangled threads of the crime, he's drawn into a world where the lines between piety and heresy blur. The killer, a guardian of forgotten lore, challenges 𝗏𝗏 to confront his own beliefs and the city's buried history. With each new murder mirroring holy martyrdom, the stakes soar beyond the spiritual realm, threatening the soul of a city caught between redemption and retribution. 𝗏𝗏 must decipher cryptic clues tied to Manila's wartime past during World War II to prevent the final act of vengeance that could ignite a religious upheaval. His journey is not just a pursuit of truth, but a question of identity in a nation caught between the past and the present. Okay, Mr. Flores is not with us here today, but I do hope he's watching the live stream so we can hear Ma'am 𝗍𝗍's and the audience's input. So first, Ma'am 𝗍𝗍, what do you think of this book pitch?
Yeah. Siguro before I go into this particular pitch, maybe I'll just talk about the selections and maraming magandang pumasok na pitches, but I think what I was looking for, and this is the same, I think, test that I applied to my own ideas, to my own, when I have an idea for a story, will it pass this test? So one important test for me is this believable in our context? And I'm usually, although I have written a little bit of speculative fiction here and there, in my crime fiction, I usually want to write to the here and now of our society and our country. So what is possible now? What is believable now? Can I, for example, set up a sort of SI type, very high-tech, in our context? And for me, the answer is no. Maybe not yet. Maybe there's some aspects that some elements that might be there, but certainly not all. So that was one of criteria ng pagpili ng mga elevator, mga pitches that I did eventually choose. I think another sort of test is not just sort of believability, but also parang there's believability in the context of our society, but there's also believability in the context of what is human behavior, no? So there are certain things that are illogical and cannot be sort of explained even with the most elaborate of explanations, no? And then finally, it's a technical test. Is this sort of progression of the plot as it's outlined in the elevator pitch, is this technically sound? So if you have someone who is being murdered as you're, for example, as you're seeing, right in front of you, can that person actually run off? Can the victim actually run off and do something else? So, in other words, what are the technical demands of the story? Because one of the reasons I think that it's difficult to write sound crime fiction is that you do need a fair bit of research. It's not like maybe a romance or maybe if you have a historical romance, then you have, but there are certain types of stories that need a little less research. Maybe if you have a period story or I don't know, something set in an ad agency or something, then you have a certain, but the demands of crime fiction are medyo they can be quite technical. I know that for one line in a specific story that I've written, I can sometimes spend days trying to find the exact information that I need. There are times when I do staging so that I know how an object will make a mark on the skin. I don't do it with real people, but yeah, so may mga ganong technical aspects. So believability in the time and the milieu, believability in terms of what is logical in human behavior, and believability in the technical terms. So going to this, the Cathedral of Shadows, I thought this was a very interesting pitch because meron siyang element ng kakaiba. So the killing is where's that? Sorry, my eyesight is very bad. The stakes, a murder. This is. Can we go back to the first page of the pitch? Yes. He's found murdered in a manner reminiscent of ancient Anito rituals. So at first, my initial reaction was, parang medyo. Is it something that's believable? Is it something that is kind of, I hesitate to use the word relevant, but is it something that we would see, no, in actual, no. But when you think about it, there are certain ritualistic aspects to some of the crimes that we see, no? So, sabi ko, this is an interesting premise. It brought to mind some Latin American crime fiction. I think Jorge Luis has a story that's kind of merong mga ritualistic elements na ganon. Reverte has also some elements that are very similar, and I would have really loved to hear from the person who wrote this pitch to find out how he plans to go through yung historical research, because I think he's playing around with some themes that are very relevant to our present day. I think I'm a Catholic, and I'll always be a Catholic. I'll never be anything else. But I think there are many things that the Catholic Church has to answer for, and therefore I thought this was something that was very appealing, and I would have loved to hear what he had in mind in terms of the direction of the plot, and what sort of research he planned to put into the story to make it come alive.
Thank you, 𝗦𝗍𝗍. Does the audience have anything they'd like to add regarding this pitch? You may come up and introduce yourself and tell us your thoughts or have any questions. Yes, EJ?
Hello. Okay. Upo na lang po ako. Si EJ po from History Department. So parang interesting for me. Although yun nga po, inisip ko lang baka, syempre hindi pa natin nakikita po itong buong kwento ni Mark Flores. Pero siguro, okay. Hello. So, pero siguro pwede pong pag-isipan ulit yung premise. Although nag-agree din po ako kay Ms. Batacan dun sa kanyang observation. Tingin ko po kung yung line na reminiscent of the ancient Anito rituals ay somehow off, kasi kung titingnan natin yung konteksto ng headhunting sa, let's say, pre-colonial period, iba yung meaning ng pag-headhunt. So for example, usually nag-headhunt ka kung may kalabang kang warrior na mas siguro ka-level mo, at kung mapatay mo siya, yung head ay parang prize dun sa community. So kung sa konteksto siya ng pinatay na priest, parang iba yung meaning niya, no? So parang ano ba yung prize yung head ng priest, instead na parang naghahanap ka ng justice, no? Sa tingin ko, ang mas kakabit niya ay actually yung pinaperpetrate ng mga Espanyol, no? So for example, may mga babaylan or bayogi na nagre-revolt noong 1600s like Tamblot and Tapar. Ang kadalasan gagawin nila pag nahuli nila yung leader nun ay i-quarter nila yung body or pupugutan nila ng ulo. Same with the Basel Revolt and the Hermano Pule Revolt. Parang chachap-chapin yung body tapos ilalagay sa iba't ibang lugar na makikita. So, hindi yung pre-colonial siguro yung kailangan balikan, kundi yung actual na ginagawa noong Spanish period ng mga Spanish mismo. So, yun lang siguro.
Thank you so much, EJ. Do you have any more input from the audience? Yes po, please introduce yourself.
Hello po, Mark po. So, sa akin lang po is, gusto ko lang may paliwanag niya kung sino si Thomas Aguilar. Kasi kung nakita ko ng putol na ulo, hindi ko iisipin yun na anito ritual. Ganun lang. Yun yung point ko. Explain niya kung sino si Thomas Aguilar, scholar ba siya or may heritage pa siya, something. Sa tingin ko okay yung kwento.
Thank you so much thank you so much from those who have spoken from the audience. Now I think we can move on to our.
May I just address?
Oh yes, of course. Go ahead, 𝗪𝗠𝗀𝗁.
And thank you, Mark, for it. Again, I would have loved for Mark, the other Mark, to be here so he can talk us through his story. But EJ, thank you so much for that. History, that aspect of history is not something I'm very familiar with, but I think it's great that you brought it up, and I think there's a chance for the writer to go through the live stream later on. I think when you start out with an idea for a story, you don't always have all the facts, and you don't always have like a perfect, and if there's anything I've learned from writing my own fiction, it's that things change, and then like I will look at a certain method or a certain maybe a certain element of the story, and then through research I'll find out, no, that's not possible, or no, that's not the way it works. So I think your input was valuable to the writer, and I hope if he does decide to pursue the story, that he can take into consideration what you said.
Thank you again, EJ, Mark, and 𝗪𝗠𝗀𝗁 for your thoughts and comments on the first elevator pitch. Sana nga po makita ni Mark Flores yung live stream at marinig po yung mga komento para sa pagpapainam ng elevator pitch. Okay, so let's move on to the next elevator pitch. Okay. This is Untitled by 𝗪𝗂. So, let me read the pitch. National artist 𝗍𝗫𝗁𝗁, a favorite of the political elite, slits his throat after a night of drinking. Investigators are baffled by his sudden suicide, but an electronic trail comes to the attention of Erwin Salas, an irregular 𝗍𝗫𝗁𝗁 student at UP Diliman. Erwin initially brushes this off as a conspiracy theory by his fringe hacker friends. But when a young woman begins knocking at his door for help, it becomes apparent that the case is more complex than it appears to be. The woman, Amanda Jacinto, seems unremarkable at first, but with an uncanny charisma and a sense of knowing more than she leads on about the case, Erwin's mundane life inadvertently intertwines with hers and spirals into one of political intrigue, societal malaise, and the ever-looming danger as he and Amanda inch closer to the truth. 𝗪𝗠𝗀𝗁𝗁, what do you think about Ms. Musni's elevator pitch?
So this pitch had a lot of things that I found intriguing. There's a national figure, a national artist who's situated in a world, sort of a stratum of society that where he's obviously quite celebrated, and then all of a sudden you have this situation where he supposedly commits suicide. I'm very intrigued by what this electronic trail is, and again, I wish Pam were here to tell us more. What is this electronic trail? What evidence does he come across? Is it a communication? Is it files? Is it, we don't know. So I also was interested in trying to find out why is Erwin hanging out with hackers? No? So, and we know this is possible because we have, people, hackers in the Philippines, and one particularly notorious one. So again, it has elements of, politics and culture and, elitism and tech. And I'm also quite intrigued by the female character. So what does she know? Is she actually there to find out what happened? Is she going to help, or is she actually going to try to hinder what Erwin might, his efforts in trying to discover more? So yeah, some of the pitches leave just enough unsaid so that you want more, and I think that's also a characteristic of this particular pitch.
Thank you so much, 𝗪𝗠𝗻𝗂. Does the audience have anything to add regarding Ms. Musni's pitch? What do we think of it? What do we think of it? Do we have any very strong thoughts about this elevator pitch? Oh, Tilde? Okay, go ahead, Tilde.
Ayan, hello. So magko-comment na rin ako dun sa sa previous na pitch alongside dito. Kasi nga interesting sila kasi nagsimula siya sa yun nga, may pakayong mga tao dun sa Catholic na bansa tulad ng Pilipinas. May pakayong tao dun sa pare. Tapos dito syempre national artist, so siya, malaki siyang balita. Ngayon magdadigress akong konti doon sa isa sa mga recently natapos ko na manga, no. So sa Pluto, no, sa Pluto ni Naoki Urasawa. So siya, tungkol siya sa high-tech na yung mundo, ganyan tapos pinapatay yung mga pinaka high-tech na mga robot, no. So magkakaroon in connection dun sa unang pitch, may may ritualistic ding factor kasi every time na may pinapatay na na robot, nag-iiwan siya ng parang sungay na horns na. So yun yung magiging parang yun yung i-exploit ni Urasawa bilang cliffhanger lagi, yung skill dun sa at I think both pitches may naman, may ganito. Kumbaga may curiosity na pwedeng Tapos in particular dito sa sa pangalawa, intriguing siya enough kasi yun nga, minsan kasi yung mga lalo yung S-word, no, yung suicide, usually siya, hindi natin sure kung suicide talaga siya or hindi, no. Kunyari yung isa sa mga suicide na personally na yun yung unang tumama sa isip ko, no. So, kunyari kung kilala niyo si Chris Cornell, no. So, kay Chris Cornell yan, vocalist ng Audio Sleeve. So may rumors na after nung suicide niya, parang may alam daw siya about child prostitution rings, ta siguro na pressure siya. May mga ganon. So hindi ko alam kung anong verified or hindi, pero ang point siya, may ilang lalabas na speculations every time na someone famous ay nagpapakamatay. Yung iba either hindi siya tanggap ng mga tao, baka may ibang bagay na nagtulak, or totoong ginawa niya yun. Sa kaso na to, yun nga, successful ka, national artist ka, ba't mo gagawin yun, no? So yun siguro muna. I think yung option nung corpse sa simula nung narrative, ano na siya, dapat deliberate enough na siya para yun nga, walang arguments dun sa mambabasa na ba't ako magkakaroon siya ng pakialam. At so far, yun nga, yung dalawa, successful naman dun sa una. Ay, last na comment dun sa, dun sa comment din ni EJ kanina, may danger, yun, may danger yung, kapag hindi na-handle na maayos, no, dangerous yung unang pitch kasi baka makareproduce siya ng colonial narratives na iniiwasan natin ngayon, no, o pag-exoticize sa mga katutubo. So without research and insights, no, at pagiging sensitibo, alin doon sa mga anitong ritual, ang dami-daming grupo. So ano ba yung pinatutungkulan nito? Or possible kasi na yung killer, ewan ko kung anong gagawin ni other Mark dun sa yung baka inaano niya lang, tawag dito, minimimic niya lang, di ba? May mga ganong possibilities, no? So mas tingin ko yung unang kwento mas kailangan ng extrang care. Delikado yun kapag na-mishandle. Hindi ko sinasabing mas madali itong pangalawa, no? Kumbaga, syempre yung pagtatighten nung loose ends niyan, mahirap din. Pero tingin ko mas delikado yung una kapag hindi na-handle ng maayos. Yun lang naman.
Thank you. Thank you, Tilde. Thank you, Ma'am 𝗍𝗍. May mga padagdag na komento po ba mula sa audience tungkol sa pangalawang pitch? Yes po, please introduce yourself.
Good morning. I'm 𝗍𝗶𝘶𝗶𝗶. Hi. Yung comment ko dito sa Untitled, my problem with most Filipino novels, telenovelas, etc., yung characters do not have much developed backstories. And this is what made smaller and smaller circles a compelling read. Hello? Yeah. Si Father 𝗍𝗂 is a very credible character. And from the start, you are hooked. And parang pretty much you can trust Father 𝗍𝗂 to take you through the story. And it cuts a lot of questions in your head. Now, my problem with Untitled is, si Erwin, what makes him qualified to be the one to investigate the crime? The first line has yung national artist. Artist for what field? I think it is a very critical detail. If the author hasn't thought of it yet, they would hit a blank wall later. So, I think dapat yung character talaga, kahit hindi lalabas dun sa story yung mga details about their life, you have to have a sense as a writer of what you are trying to portray. And so, because the reader will also get a sense of it. So here, parang medyo, I am doubting irregular 𝗪𝗀 student siya. Is he connected with mga law enforcers? Parang, bakit ko siya susundan sa kwentong to? Yun lang po yung point ko. Thank you.
Thank you po, May. Are there any additional comments? Okay. I think we can move on to discussing the final pitch for today's elevator pitch session. Okay, so, DM by Ella Hermonio. Okay. Probing the disappearance of her 21-year-old niece, journalist Aya discovers that in a span of a year, at least 6 other women under 40 were reported missing in Metro Manila. With the case subjects living in different cities and having diverse professions, Aya finds it difficult to trace whether these were even related, until her search for evidence brings her online. Across the social media accounts of the 7 missing women, she sees a pattern among their posts: struggles with depression and insinuations of wanting to take their own lives. With the consent of the families, Aya gained access to the women's accounts. She observes that among their last private message exchanges were with male friends who invited them to meet to vent their frustrations in life, along with hints of intimacy. Here, Aya realizes a common script. Despite bearing different names, the online friend approaches them, expressing empathy about their mental health, gains their trust, drops nuance of catching feelings, convinces them to meet, and proposes to take their own lives together. While pulling strings from her police connections, Aya commits to tracing down the culprit with herself as the bait, as a depressed and vulnerable social media girl. Okay, Ma'am 𝗍𝗍, Tilde, do either of you have any opinions on this pitch?
Ano lang, yung totoo ba na ano, bakit siya papayagan kaagad na mag-gain ng access dahil niece siya? Doon lang ako medyo na ano, parang hindi ba praning yung mga kamag-anak na sino to? Parang, so yun lang, masyado lang mabilis yung mga bagay-bagay na parang, ayun, yun lang yung una kong nakitang parang, parang, yun, medyo duda ako doon sa, baka kailangang ayusin yung kredibilidad ni ano, ni Aya. Yun siguro muna, parang iniisip ko pa kung anong pwedeng constructive or pwedeng suggestion dun sa na nagsulat.
I was going to point that out, so we are on the same wavelength. So yung isa ko pang nakita, and this is not to criticize, no. This is our intention is maybe to help the writer shape the story, or maybe take it in a direction that is more believable. Yeah. So if Aya is really a professional, medyo merong mga ethical concerns about using yourself as bait. I know that we see it in films, we see it in, parang in-entrap, and, but from my practice of journalism, and it's generally frowned upon in a professional organization, in a professional context. You're not supposed to put yourself, I mean, there's a certain kind of journalism where you do put yourself in the story. But in this case, she's not law enforcement. She's not, kumbaga, she doesn't have the authority, legal or, in any context. She doesn't have any authority to entrap. She doesn't have any authority to do this sort of thing. So baka merong mga ethical gray areas that, or maybe that is the intention of the writer, to show that this is a journalist who is willing to, to cross boundaries. This is a journalist who is willing to sort of play in that gray area. So we don't know. Again, Ella's not here. So siguro yun yung mga tanong na pwede niyang paglaruan, ano? I totally agree with Tilde as well when he says that families would, una-una, Tilde is right that why would you give someone access? Second, how many of you give your families access to your social media? Di ba? Parang, no. Di ba? Parang, so it's not really, it's something that she might need to work on. And Ella, I don't know if if you ever listen to this. I think what I found attractive about this pitch, and there is something that I think is is attractive with the pitch, is that the preying on the vulnerable. And again, it is something that needs to be handled with sensitivity. It's something that I think does happen, and whether it's in Singapore, for example, these days there are a lot of what the police call love scams. So you see these kind of lonely, whether they're male or female, middle-aged or elderly, they find a chance at love or what they think is love. And the person just steadily empties their bank accounts, So yung mga ganyang dynamic where the vulnerable are victimized, I think this is something that does happen, and it would be interesting to see how Ella develops the story and treats the sensitivities of such a story.
Thank you, Tilde. Thank you, Ma'am 𝗍𝗍. May ibabahagi po ba ang ating audience ngayon? Would anyone like to comment on Ms. Remonio's elevator pitch? Oh, Ms. 𝗍𝗶𝘶 commented on Facebook on her elevator pitch. For the electronic, she says, for the electronic trail is also something I've been trying to develop as well. But I do remember friends who have been doing white hat hacking, which is hacking for more productive purposes. So I was thinking they were a group of friends who just like hacking as a hobby. For Amanda naman, when I was formulating the story many years ago, I was thinking of her being the main character, driving towards the resolution of the story, but at the same time, being someone Erwin could not comprehend fully. And then she says, oh, and got it po, ma'am. Thank you for the comment. For this, I was thinking Joselito was an artist for the visual arts, painting in particular. Yung kay Erwin, since Amanda would be the prime mover, he was more of someone who tags along. But yeah, I will develop here further. And then sabi po ni Mark Flores, just tuned in, am able to watch online as I cannot come because of the strikes, so no to jeepney face out. But otherwise, in addition to that, Ma'am 𝗍𝗍, may additional comments ba kayo sa mga sinabi ni Ms. Musni?
Yeah, I mean, as we were saying with EJ's very insightful comment, that your pitch is not set in stone. It is kind of like the bare bones of the story. As you can see from our discussion, dami nating tanong dun sa at saka gusto sana nating nandito sila, no? Kasi and thanks to Pam for sending us her responses as well. Lahat yan pwedeng magbago, pwedeng maging pwedeng hindi national artist, pwedeng respected or parang pwedeng popular matinee idol, pwedeng maraming pwedeng magbago habang nagsusulat tayo ng ng kwento, maaring ma-rethink ni Mark as Tilde mentioned, the sensitivities of that colonialist, baka merong implications. Can I do something else with this? And I think that's the great thing about writing is that you can, up until the point that it's out there in the world, you can change the world of the story. You can change the premise, you can change the characters, you can give them more detailed backstories, you can give them lives that are that kind of sort of predispose them for the actions they will take within the story. So magandang mapag-usapan yung mga initial na ideas kasi para tayong nakikipag-usap sa kaibigan natin si Pam, si Mark, si Ella, si Ella pala. Nakikipag-usap tayo sa kanila, although they're not here, na, uy, baka pwedeng gawin mo to. Or, we're not saying, oh, mali yan, gano'n. It's really, uy, mukhang interesante yung idea mo, baka pwedeng ganito. Or, naisip mo na ba na ganito? Di ba? So, I think I'm very grateful to those in the audience who have given their feedback as well. And I think if I were in the shoes of our young writers, I would be really, really grateful. And I'm grateful for your input as well.
Maraming salamat po, Ma'am 𝗍𝗍. Would anyone like to comment on Ella's speech, on Ms. Hermonia's speech? Yes po.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ed. I'm currently a CL major here sa UP Diliman. So, I'd just like to raise a point kasi I really love the fact that Ms. Batacan said na in order to know a culture, you must read their crime fiction. And I think that is very imperative kasi it reveals a lot of like the realities and the suffering, the entire suffering that the place or the region or the country in itself is going through. So, so far I've seen in all pitches, they're mostly northern, Manila-centric. So it would be also nice to hear that that other regions or other writers in all parts of our country are writing about their vicinity, that they can also explore crime fiction. So I think there is also a contention in terms of representation. So that is one of the things that I really want to raise, because the first one, it mostly talks about like which is the dominant religion in the country, which is Catholicism. The second one talks about like this national artist and another character who's studying at UP Diliman. And this third one just mentions Metro Manila, but I don't know where the Metro Manila context underlies, like why is it in Metro Manila? So it raises a lot of questions regarding the geographical setting of all these three pitches. So what would I like to raise is that I think we should be mindful of in which part or what location we wish to engage, like not just as a writer, but also as readers ourselves. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for Eden. Thank you, Eden. Does anyone like to add anything to what Eden mentioned? Or you might have your own opinions on the third pitch. Yes po, yung katabi po ni Eden.
Hello. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Reina, and I'm a creative writing student. So, parang medyo tahimik po ako kasi I'm just a student. Nahihiya po ako magsalita. And one of the things that that's medyo off for me is how sa second page po, yung last sentence, as the depressed and vulnerable social media girl, parang baka sa akin lang, pero parang in-invalidate ng author lang din ng nagsulat yung mga people na na-depressed or like are going through mental health issues right now. And para sa akin po na marami po kong
Really could not have done it. Really could not have committed the crime. And ganun yung mga, there are situations that you come across in the provinces. And of course, it happens here in Metro Manila, but yung din sa mga probinsya, it's almost on a whole different level. I think merong kultura na naiiba rin. So, yes, totally agree. Setting is important when you're writing crime fiction. For Reina's remark, sorry, refresh my memory, I'm getting old. You talked about the last sentence, right? As being, do you feel it's kind of a little dismissive of, yeah. So, again, I feel like this is something the writer could address in the writing of it. And just like Tilde's concerns over the first pitch, na baka merong mga sensitivities that the writer needs to work around, I also think that it's tied in with the idea of using herself as bait, that it's something that maybe she doesn't fully understand. Aya, the journalist, doesn't really fully understand the implications of as well. And I want to think that it's something that the writer can sort of finesse as she goes about writing the story. But I have faith. And I do think it's an important story from also from a woman's point of view, that you know, it's not dismissive of the realities of depression and all. So hopefully we will see the story at some point, you know, couple of months or years down the road.
Thank you so much, 𝗪𝗠𝗍, and also to Reina and Eden. We have some time left, so I think we can tackle the fourth elevator pitch, if that's okay, 𝗪𝗠𝗍. Okay. It is from Carol Ann. It's entitled Something's Wrong with Anna's Social Media Posts. After breaking up with Francis, 20-year-old Scarlett continued to look at his social media accounts for updates. Her constant stalking eventually made her stumble upon 18-year-old Anna's social media accounts, which she thinks are eerily quiet. Scarlett thinks this is strange behavior from Anna, Francis's sister to whom she grew close. Anna is known to be a frequent poster who aspired to be a social media influencer. Scarlett then sets out to uncover what Anna is up to by digging deeper into her activities. Convinced that Anna is in danger, Scarlett goes to the police, but they don't take her seriously because her evidence is social media and a hunch. Determined to save Anna, she then convinced Francis to set aside their differences to find out what's wrong and eventually save Anna from potential harm. Okay, 𝗪𝗍𝗍, do you have any comments on this pitch?
Okay, I kind of chose this as a runner-up in the sense that, again, we live in a world where social media is so pervasive in our lives. But what I was thinking, and I don't know if Carol Ann will be looking at this live stream as well, is that yung first part, this is in journalistic terms, this is kind of like burying the lead. You know the term. The most important part is buried, right in to be. She aspires to be a little bit like Anna, and then she starts seeing that the deluge becomes a trickle of posts, and then that's when that's when she starts wondering what's wrong. Now, the second point to me is that, so what? Diba? So that's always, so she doesn't post. Diba? So maybe she's on holiday, maybe she's sick, maybe she's going through a difficult time in her life. So what makes you think she's in danger? So I think that's something that the writer needs to address, is that it cannot just be because the person is, for all you know, maybe she got knocked up, you know, or maybe she got sick or something like that. So, and the third point is, even as a friend, or even as, you know, the pitch says she's grown close to the person. Why not speak with the person? Diba? That's the fastest way to ano. So there are interesting elements to this pitch. I do think it needs a fair bit of refinement. It needs sharpening of the focus. So to me, if I were writing this story, I would begin with Anna. I would begin sort of maybe working backwards from Anna's disappearance. Who was she? What was she? Who were the people she was involved with? What circles did she run in? So then we start to build a picture of who she was, and then we start to wonder, along with Anna, we see parang what is significant about her not posting. And yeah, I would just work backwards. I would forget about Francis. No, not because of anything else, but I think if we want to introduce the idea that Francis was Scarlett's ex, that can come later, diba? Parang it's not the lead. Yeah?
Thank you so much, Ma'am 𝗍𝗍. Tilde, the audience, do you have anything you'd like to add about Carol Ann's pitch? Or do we have any comments in the live stream? Yes, okay. Oh, okay. So Miss Ella Hermonio gave comments on the response to the third pitch. She says, "Thank you po for the comments. They are duly noted. The concept came from a 2020 news story in Japan about someone they called the Twitter killer, using the same mode of baiting in the pitch. Yes, I agree po, it needs further research. On Aya baiting herself, I was thinking of her doing it with a personal motive since it involves her niece. On the invalidation of depressive issues, she says, that was not my intention. I hope to recognize vulnerability of people going through struggles online. And another note on Aya baiting herself, yes, she does it because it's something she has personal culpability in. Okay.
Address the baiting
Yes,
issue.
Ma'am 𝗍𝗍. Okay.
One way that Ella could address this is if she had found a sympathetic person in law enforcement who she could work with, and then it would be believable that they would work together. Oh, sige, ikaw kunyari yung ano. But she has the sanction, the backing of someone who does have the authority and the sort of the license to conduct such a what do you call it, an operation. But on her own, I think there would be very ethical questions. And also, it exposes the journalist to danger. And that's something that it's not something that a journalist would go into without sanction from his editors, her editors, someone in authority. They would have to know, they would have to go through controls within the newsroom, and then they would have to sign off on it. So yun yung mga stages before she could even participate in something like this. So maybe it's another thing that Ella can look into, is to find out how such operations are really conducted. And very often, you cannot do it without law enforcement backing.
Thank you po, Ma'am 𝗍𝗍. Does the audience have any? Tilde, go ahead.
Siguro kailangan mag-decide ng writer kung ano bang focus niya o gusto niya mangyari dito. Kasi parang may at least dalawa, no? Sa title, tungkol to kay Ana, pero parang mas gusto, pero dahil involved alisin na natin si Francis kung ano. Dahil involved si Francis, parang gusto mo bang parang it seems like gusto gamitin yung problem na biglang nag-disappear sa social media si Ana para muling magbalikan. No? Parang may confusion, muling magbalikan kasi dito sa second page. Okay, ayaw paniwalaan si Scarlett, so kailangan kong kausapin yung ex ko. So, diba, parang nagbago yung focus. So, siguro, yun nga, pag tinanggal si Francis, baka yun nga, medyo mas magkakaroon ng focus, o mas sharp, mas precise kung anong gustong mangyari. Kasi it gets in the way yung potential love story nila na yun nga, it gets in the way dun sa supposedly pag-discover what's up, anong problema, kung ba't siya nawala. Ayun, yun lang naman.
Thank you, Tilde. From the audience, does anyone have any input on Carol Ann's speech? Okay, if there's no input, I think we can move on to one of the final parts of our event today, which is the open discussion. So if any of you have any questions for Ma'am 𝗍𝗍 or for Tilde, I think we can come up to the mic to speak, to introduce yourself and your question. I think meron pong isang question, Ma'am 𝗍𝗍, sa live stream. Meron pong tanong, and in your upcoming book of stories, will there be any stories featuring Father Lucero and Father Gus Sáenz, because they're very compelling characters in fiction?
So there are at least 3 stories that will feature Father Sáenz. Sometimes he will be in the forefront, sometimes he will be in the background. So, ayun, but he will definitely be there.
Thank you, Ma'am 𝗍𝗍. And Joanna, the journalist, is also in the excerpt that you read out. Do you have any questions for Ma'am 𝗍𝗍 regarding? Yes, po.
Hello, I'm Alexis. I'm an MA creative writing student. My question is, because you said that you wrote the book in the 1990s and 15 years later you rewrote it again. And I was wondering, what were the things you added or drastically changed in 2013, as well as kind of like over the years, what were the things you learned along the way that made you want to change them?
I guess the most important thing is that in the interim when the book first came, or when I first wrote the book, and then when the book first came out, and then when I was revising it in 2013, was that I became a mother. I had my son in 2012, and that really, because these are children, these are child victims, no? And becoming a mother really kind of, what was admittedly an abstract loss, became very concrete. So, dumating yung punto nung, and I think one of the things that I liked so much more about the new version versus the old version was that meron yung punto de vista ng mga ina. Meron yung punto de vista ng lola, nung isa sa mga bata. And I think that's important because very often we forget, even in our daily, our daily life, when we see something in the news, when we read about something, parang the victims become statistics, no? Tapos ang pinagtutuunan ng pansin na yung ang salarin na ganito siya, ganito ganyan. But I think it's really important to put a face to the names of those who have been killed, those who have suffered. So yun yung sa akin pinaka-significant na difference, is that the new version explores the backstories of the victims more and the people they left behind. Yeah.
Thank you po, Ma'am Ichin. Thank you, Alexis, for that question. Are there any more questions? Yes, I think we have a lot of questions, yes. First, yung naka-black sa may harapan.
Okay. Hello, I'm Aidan Donales. I'm from Ateneo. And actually, since this might be the only time I get to talk to you, so I'm just gonna have like a history and how I know like smaller and smaller circles and stuff. Kasi like I was born actually in the year that you released the book, 2002. I think the first original release of the book. Sorry for the reminder. But yeah, I read the book when I was in Cebu. And then, because my school there sa Ateneo din sa Cebu, we had a showing. Like one of the producers screened the movie dun sa school namin for smaller and smaller circles. And that's how I got to be familiar with the work. And I came from a Jesuit institution, so I was very familiar with the Jesuit priests there. Like, not familiar, but like with how Jesuit priests work and stuff like that. So it was very interesting for me. And there were these priests that are also like forensic pathologists and stuff like that. It was very interesting. So my question, since I brought up now, I was born like in 2002, and most of the crime fiction that I read now and the movies that I watch about crimes, they always incorporate this sort of social media element where like things get trending, where like these news stories, it's not just controlled, I guess, by journalists or the police, the information that's being spread. The people are also part of the process of spreading information. Even online, there's like online sleuths and detectives, where you can practically work on a case without, sorry, Alon. Or you can practically work on a case without needing like the police or something like that, where you can solve it yourself. I just wanted to know, especially since you're working on your second novel na din, and like such a huge time difference from the release of the first one, has social media or like these emerging technologies sort of informed your work now and how you've been viewing crime fiction?
I would say that yes, you can get information, but is it the right information? Because we've all seen, in the last 6 or 7 years, just how pervasive the misinformation, disinformation, deliberate planting of false narratives and false information is out there. So one of the things I always think about, so people will ask me, friends will ask me, ano ba talagang objective mo? Ba't nagsusulat ka ng crime fiction? Bakit, bakit yun ang napili mo na ano? So, one of the things I always say is that yung paghahabol ng katarungan, the search for justice in the Philippines is always, it stops at the first or the second step. So, samantalang ang investigation and bringing something to justice, finding justice is a long process. So, madalas doon tayo natitigil sa first or second step. Hanggang dito lang tayo. And very often, the ordinary person, myself included, we have no choice. That is only as far as we're allowed to go. When Science and Lucero and even to some extent Joanna want to illustrate, I mean the characters, the objective is that mahaba man ang proseso, mahaba man ang tatahakin mo bago ka dumating doon, kailangan mo pa rin tahakin. Kailangan mo pa rin to move from step 1, step 2, step 3. May method, may sistema, may proseso. Ngayon, kung ang gagawin mo is what we see a lot, is shortcut ka, shortcut na lang natin to, or pwede na yan dahil or hanapan na lang natin ng somebody who looks the part. Ganon. Hindi natin talaga ma-attain yung hanap nating na katarungan. So, what if you're faced with the reality na talagang hindi, I would say 90% of the cases that we hear and read about never really reach their hoped for conclusion. No? But for me, minsan hindi na yun eh, wag mo nang asahan. Pero ang sa akin is to point out na may proseso and for us to demand na i-push natin. I'm not going to be satisfied with step 1 and step 2. I want step 3. And if I can push you further, I want step 4. And if you tell me to stop at step 4, okay, pero na-push kita beyond step 2. Okay? So the next time, the next generation or whatever, maybe I'll push you to step 5 and 6. Maybe I'll push you to step 7 and 8. And somehow you will keep demanding it. Kasi narating mo na yung step 7 and 8 eh. Bakit ako babalik sa step 1 and 2? Diba? Parang, why should I be satisfied with latak when I can have putik? Diba? I can have at least something drinkable. Diba? At pag nainom ko na yung putik, bakit hindi ako, just to push the, until one day, you can give me clean drinking water. Diba? So, in terms of social media and all that, for me, it's not really, it's, a lot of it is noise. What I want to write about is the process. What I want to see and what I want to show the reader is that may proseso and you, the reader, can push for it. Whether it's in actual cases that you're involved in or actual cases that you feel strongly about, or whether it's in your vote. Di ba? Parang ang boto nyo, boto natin, is a push for that process. We want to put people in place who will follow that process.
Okay. Thank you, Ma'am 𝗍𝗍. May question yata from the girl in white. Yes.
Hi, hello. My name is Regine. I'm a journalist also, and I'm a huge fan of your work. Hi, Lakan. I wanted to ask a couple of questions. The first also because, you are a journalist and formerly working in intelligence by profession, how you navigate the movement of taking inspiration from real life cases and then fictionalizing them. Are there any ethics that we should be sensitive to when drawing from these cases? And then the second question is, one of the things that I loved about the book was that for some reason, and I don't know if it's a similar experience with other people in the room, even though it was Filipino fiction in English, when the language unfolded to me, when the dialogue, when I was reading the dialogue, it occurred to me in Filipino. There was a very Filipino stir to it, which was a very strange feeling because I was reading it in English, but I was processing the story in Filipino. So I wanted to ask how you navigate that and what tips you would have for writing dialogue.
Okay, siguro yung first question muna. Yeah, okay. Now I can hear myself. I never write directly about the stories that I've worked on, or the situations but I write more about attitudes. Kasi yung attitudes are very pervasive, at saka yung mga mindset, it's really like whether you go into the civil service or whether you go into situations as a journalist, sometimes you will come up across attitudes and mindsets that parang you fling yourself against a wall. And for me, whether it's I'm writing about the cardinal or whether I'm writing about the obstructionist, I forgot his name, the curly-haired guy at NBI. They're not real people. They are representations of attitudes, representations of mindsets. The 𝗩𝗶𝘀𝗶𝗶, who is sort of like the aspiring NBI, he wants to take over from 𝗪𝗪. That is not a person, that is an attitude. That is not a real someone that I met or someone that I worked with. He is a distillation of many people that I worked with and many people that I've met. So, yun yung, I guess, yung ethical na ano. But I'm not beyond dropping little hints. Seeding little, ano, and again, not necessarily real persons, but yung may konting kiliti na, uy, parang may kilala akong ganyan. Yun. So, and these may not necessarily be persons that I've worked with or on whom who have been involved in anything that is related to my work. Second question is, although I write in English, yung pag-iisip ko is very Pinoy. So, and if you're not angry about something every day, you're not really participating. Diba? Parang, so one of the highest compliments I received about this, about circles is that someone told me fairly recently, just last year, na, alam mo, napaka-jologs ng circles. And for me, that was such a huge compliment dahil all these years, I've heard accusations na parang, napaka-elitista, yung mga bida, Atenista, and ganito, Inglesero, and ganon. But to be told that actually jologs is, for me, it was nakakataba ng puso because ako personally, hindi kami laking privileged. We're not. My parents, for the longest time, we lived in a tiny apartment in Cubao. Hindi kami laking mayaman or ano. I think the biggest luxury we ever had as a family was yung pupunta kami ng Peco pag may sweldo, tapos pwede kami bumili ng tig-isang libro. So, yun ang pupunta kami ng Peco, pupunta kami ng national or whatever. Tapos, yun ang luxury namin. So, when people say, elitista, you don't know the life I've lived, and you don't know how close we are to, the realities we write about. So, in terms of navigating that, in trying to write in a language and making it sound like another language, I think it's really the heart. And if you live and breathe your country, if you live and breathe, and if every day your news feed is giving you something to be angry about, every day your word of mouth or whatever, the channels you're plugged into, giving you heartache for the country you left behind, I think it's not possible to write without that soul.
Thank you, Ma'am 𝗍𝗍. I think we have time for one last question. So, Ma'am Honey.
Hi, 𝗍𝗍. I work with your publisher. And actually, the question I wanted to ask, we've been talking about craft, fantastic comments from everyone from you. But I wanted, because we were doing pitching, so I was wondering, what was your publishing journey like? Did you pitch in the same way that the others were pitching? What was it like from the first book, Smaller and Smaller Circles? You're one of the few Filipinos who was actually published by an international publisher. We're talking about how your voice is Filipino. It's like the language of your wounds, but you're being led internationally by non-Filipino readers. So how is that? How do you navigate that, that reality, that you're speaking about social realities in the Philippines, and how is it being received elsewhere? So those are basically two questions, but yeah, interested to hear more about that.
Thank you, Honey. I always say that this book has had a life of its own, quite apart from me, because if I were a mother and it were my child, I would be the most neglectful of, I would be like unfit mother. Kasi parang I wrote it, I sent it off to the Palancas, I forgot about it. Parang tapos, and then it won the Palanca, and I left for Singapore, and bye-bye. Parang talagang neglectful mother. Yun, so, and then it has really been, I'll be honest, I'm not the best speaker. I'm not the most comfortable in this situation. So, if I get invited to festivals, and not always, but I often find an excuse, and it's a true excuse because I do have work, I do have a child to raise, I'm a single parent. So, madalas, I don't really go out there to advance the interests of my work. So I've been very fortunate that other people have seen value, and when it first came out, it was under UP Press, the short version. It was part of their their students edition, which I think was a huge, I don't know if, maybe many of you would be too young to remember that, but it was a very plain blue cover with a white title, So parang that put the book, because yeah, so that put the book in many hands, and in, I think, the hands that I most wanted them to be in. Students, I think it sold una for 100 pesos, or 120, and it was affordable. People were people were assigning it in their teachers were assigning it to their students, and so then, and all of this, again, being the neglectful mother that I am, all of this was happening without my knowledge. I was off in Singapore working, and really I had no idea that teachers were requiring it, and blah blah blah. And then after that, nagkaroon ng my agents, Caranda, they were looking for Southeast Asian writers, and there was a time they came to the Philippines, and Andrea Passion Flores said, why don't you, she gave, I think, a list of titles that they might be interested in, and that's how it was. Parang I got agented, and so yun yung nagsimula nung afterwards, a couple of years after I signed with Jacaranda, then Soho expressed interest, and then, but they said, oh, this is too short. So we want a novel length, a real novel length. So nagkataon naman na I was in between jobs, and patutulugin ko yung baby, the real baby, my real baby. And tapos saka ko asikasuhin yung isa kong baby. Yun. So during those 6 months when I was in between jobs, I was expanding the book, so that a lot of things, and I had the great good fortune to have an editor, si Juliet Grains, who really line edited, and she really helped me shape the book into something I think is much better than the original. So yun yung journey. Again, so much of it was luck, and no thanks to me.
Thank you so much, 𝗪𝗂𝗍𝒂. Unfortunately, you run out of time, so I hope that you enjoyed the talk and the reaction, and I hope we all wish 𝗪𝗂𝗍𝒂 well on her flight back to Singapore soon, and also buy her book outside and get some of the ice cream she gave us. So to close today's event, 𝗩𝗶𝘀𝗶𝗫, let me call on the the director of the UP Institute of Creative Writing, Dr. Rómulo Bacchiran. Sir Bacchiran, Sir Joey.
Halatang interesante itong event na to dahil Usually nag-i-end na 30 minutes before the time, pero ito, 30 minutes after the time, gustong-gusto pa rin natin. Gusto nating batiin si 𝗍𝗍 sa kanyang book talk ngayon. At binabati ko rin siya sa pagkapanalo ng pambansang alagad ni Balagtas noong isang araw. Deserve na deserve, ano? At ito ngang siya matatawag siyang kriminal na manunulat, ay hindi. Manunulat na pang-krimen, ano? Sa yes. And last but not least, Arvin Acuna bilang panelist.